Okay, right, we're good to go. So I've just cut from the vent right up in between these pelvic fins. I'm going to stop there for the moment and peer inside. So immediately, what I notice inside here is that there are no eggs. So this is most likely not a female. If it was a female, there'd be lots of eggs inside there on either side of this fish. So I'm going to continue this cut all the way up to in between the gills, right up here, okay? That allows me to completely separate the inside of that fish and have a much closer look. And maybe even start removing some of these organs. Okay, so now we've gone as far as the gills, so now we can separate this and have a closer look inside. Okay, so we've got various organs in here. I'm going to go through them very quickly, one at a time, and then we're going to remove them one by one. So first of all, inside here we've got our swim bladder, very important for any fish. Right up there, a dark red, that's our heart. Over here, this huge organ over there, that's our liver. And then all this messy stuff from here right down to the vent, that's our alimentary tract. Very important for any animal that wants to digest their food. Okay, so now I'm going to start removing this. I'm going to start from the vent all the way up to the mouth as far as I can go and remove that alimentary tract. Okay, so inside this alimentary tract you can see little bits of food that it's been eating. So if you eat plant material, you need a long gut to digest that. Because plants aren't fantastic food unless you digest them for a long time. So I'm still pulling out gut. That's what's coming out here. I know it's gut because there's poo inside it. Okay, so the membranes around this alimentary tract at this point, now you can see where the nutrients are coming from the food into the bloodstream. Because that alimentary tract has to be surrounded by blood vessels in order to absorb any of that nutrients. Okay, so as I pull this out, you can see lots of white stuff. And that white stuff is the same white stuff that we might have in our body. That's fat. Now fat is a very great adaptation for storing energy, but it's also great for keeping warm in cool environments. That means that tilapia can survive in really, really cold water, not freezing water, but very cool water as well as quite warm water. That means that they can compete in cooler lakes as well as warmer lakes around the world. That means that they can compete with other native fish. In behind all of that stuff, protected, where they should be protected, running from where that anus was, where that vent was, all the way down the inside here are two long thin structures. There are gonads of this male fish. Okay, so what we're now going to look at is one of the most important organs in any animal's body, and in particular in fish's bodies, and that's the liver. Now ordinarily the liver would be very, very dark. If you were alive, the liver would be very dark, it would be very red, deep red in colour, because that's where a lot of your blood gets filtered through, where it gets replenished. In here, because this fish has been dead for quite a while, it's not that bright red anymore. So I'm going to remove the liver now. It's a very delicate process because there's lots around it that might get damaged on the way out. Okay, so we're going to start up at the top and we're going to try and remove that liver. So imagine you had a balloon in your body that you could fill with air or deflate of air whenever you wanted to. That's what the swim bladder is. Because if you're a fish, you're going to sink unless you've got some kind of buoyancy. That's where the swim bladder comes in. So if a fish wants to sink, it'll belch. It'll get rid of some of that air. You might see the fish, a little bubble coming out of the mouth of the fish. That's how it sinks down. Last main organ in the internal structure is our heart. A dark red organ right in between these gills here. So if you think about it, our heart is very, very near our lungs. That's exactly where it needs to pump the blood around that's just been filled with oxygen from the air. Same with this fish. That blood has just been filled with oxygen from its gills, from the water. It now needs to pump it around its body as fast, as strongly as possible. So that's why the heart lies right in between these gills. So the last thing we're going to do now that we've looked at the internal structure is look at one of those structures that's both internal and external, and that's the gills. So this is our breathing apparatus of this fish. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this bony protective plate across these gills. That's called the operculum. Very, very important with fish, because if it wasn't for this, those very delicate gills will be exposed to the water, to other predators maybe. So we're going to remove this operculum if we can. So what I'm going to try and do now is I'm going to try and remove these gills as delicately as possible, because inside those gills there's a very important structure that protects the gills from the other side. Okay, so this is a fine feathery structure on the outside of the gill. So as the water passes by there, it passes by a lot of blood, a lot of really fine blood vessels or capillaries. That's how it absorbs the oxygen from the water. But on the other side, the internal structure of the gills, you can see it's got these little, what we call gill rakes. They prevent food from going through those gills, because otherwise you're literally going to choke on your food. So as it's eating, those rakes go across the gaps in those gills, so that the food goes in the right way and not out through the gills. Okay, so ordinarily eyes are quite difficult to get from the outside, but the trick is, now that I've got the gills removed, I can take a little finger, I can put it in behind the eye, and I can pop the eye out, just like that. So you might notice immediately that this eye doesn't have an eyelid. We have eyelids, reptiles have a couple of pairs of eyelids, fish don't have them. They don't need them because, especially if you're a saltwater fish, you're constantly washing your eyes with salty water. That's one dissected fish. Okay, so now I've just finished surgery and I'm covered in blood and guts. And there's no way of me getting these gloves off without getting covered in blood and guts myself. However, there's one little trick up my sleeve. So if I pinch my fingers together and grab this end of the glove, I can pull this glove in through there and trap that blood and guts inside there. This hand is clean, and now if I pinch the end of this glove and pull that over that glove, I've now contained that blood and guts in 2 layers of very heavy duty latex. And now I can handle that, because the only thing that's on that glove now is my sweat.
لا عادي عادي بسيطة.
To the bin? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Shukran. Okay.
I don't think so.